We're now going to hear from Professor Lyndsey Nickels, who's Professor of Cognitive Science and Director of IDEALAB at Macquarie University.
Good evening. My field of research is hard to label. It's at the intersection of psychology, linguistics and speech pathology. If you had to put a label on it, you'd call it the cognitive neuropsychology of language, but nobody knows what that means. So if I try and give you a flavour, my research has got three main aims. The first is to help test and evaluate theories of language processing. So that's the steps that you or I go through when we try and understand or produce a word, whether that's a spoken word or a written word. The second aim is to try and understand what happens when language processing is impaired. So when a child fails to acquire language or literacy in the typical way, or when adult language is impaired after brain damage. So be that brain damage as a result of a stroke, in which case the language disorder is called aphasia, or as a result of a dementing disorder, in which case it's called progressive aphasia. The third aim of my research is to investigate which treatments can improve language impairments, and more importantly, under what circumstances, so for which people, under which conditions, and why. Why is it that these treatments work for some people and not for others? What are the mechanisms underlying it? So that's in a nutshell what I do, but I thought maybe I'd try and give you a bit of a flavour of why I got into it, what motivated me and continues to motivate me. So I'm a speech pathologist by training and worked clinically for a few years before I moved into academia. And my clinical work was mostly with people with acquired language impairment, so people with aphasia. And what particularly fascinated me was the kinds of errors they made when they were trying to produce a word and weren't able to. So for example, Mike is a young man who came off the back of a motorbike and had a traumatic brain injury. I asked him to simply say the word trumpet after me. He couldn't say trumpet, but he said jazz. I said trumpet, he repeated it as jazz. Another man, Tom, had a stroke at the age of 40. I asked him to name a picture of a trumpet. When I asked him to write down the name, he could do that no problem. If I asked him to say the name, he wasn't able to. If I gave him the name written down, he named it as drums. So what's going on? You know, these people had perfectly normal language systems until they had brain damage. So whatever's happening is that they've still got normal language systems, but with bits kind of broken. So what I wanted to do was try and work out, you know, how and why they were broken and what we could do to fix them. Now, the other thing that I find particularly interesting is it's not just that we need to work out what those problems are. So we need to work out what the problems are, and in order to do that, we need good theories of how the unimpaired language system works. We then need to work out what the impairment is, and only when we've done that can we work out what the treatment, the right treatment will be. So that relates to those three aims. But you can also use the impairments that these people have to inform the theories themselves. And that's really the heart of cognitive neuropsychology. So for example, there's one theory that says, in order to be able to write a word, you first have to be able to say a word. So if you show someone a picture, they must be able to say it in order to be able to write it. But Tom could write the word without being able to say it. So Tom's impairment can allow us to falsify that first theory and support a second theory that says that both written and spoken naming must be independent processes. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of a flavour of what I do and why I find it interesting. I'd like to very much thank you for the honour of being able to stand up here and for the time to give you that flavour. Thank you.